Hello, and welcome to another edition of Finding, Writing, and Citing, an introduction to using WMU library resources. Today's lesson, Navigating Data, the search for relevance and comprehensiveness amid the ocean of online information. Or in other words, advanced techniques of online research. What we're going to learn today, we're going to make the distinction between known item versus topical searching because what you're searching for sometimes dictates how you search for it. We're going to discuss briefly the limits of searching for print materials, particularly in the library catalog. You'll get the distinction of full text searching versus metadata searching. And most of what we will be spending our time on will be expanding and narrowing your results using various search techniques. Okay, topical versus known item. Well, topical is just like it sounds. You type in a term, a subject, a topic that you're looking for, and you want everything that you can find on this that seems relevant or recent, etc. The problem in the online world, as we'll see, is that it's difficult to get relevance and comprehensiveness. You get a lot of stuff. You get comprehensive. You get a lot of stuff you don't want. You narrow it down. You miss a lot of stuff you do want. But topical searching, there's an art and a science to it. Known item searching, we have a saying among librarians that the professor wants one thing. An expert in the subject doesn't do a lot of topical searching typically, is just reading scholarly works and looking in footnotes, has a citation in hand, goes to the library and says, I want this particular item. So if the faculty member wants one thing, the graduate student wants everything. The one thing a graduate student is typically afraid of is getting blindsided by some citation some work that came out while they were doing the research that they were not aware of. The undergraduate typically wants anything. The paper is due tomorrow. Well, as graduate students, you will want to do a lot of topical searching, but there will be times where you will need to do known item searching because, you get a reference from your professor or you have done some searching in another database or you're looking at a footnote. And, so what you need to do then is, instead of wallowing around looking for among hundreds of things, you want to get that one thing. Now, we're not going to be talking about that too much in our library courses because it's pretty straightforward. But I just want you to know that there are differences in the doing known item versus topical searching. One of the things that you want to keep in mind when you're looking, particularly in the library catalog, is you're searching for physical print materials, and therefore you're not searching the full text. You're going to be limited in what you're searching for based on what's called the metadata, the data about the data that we catalogers attach to the record. So we put the name of the author and the title of the book, subject, publishing year, and the publisher. But so those things you can search on, but obviously you can't search for the text that's on page 50. So in an online database, you can search for all of the metadata as well as search within the text. One of the other differences is that in the library catalog, and most libraries, that they don't have the staff to catalog at a very detailed level. You will not find typically in a library catalog the article in a particular journal or the paper in a conference proceedings or a chapter in a compilation of essays in a book of essays. You will get just the general work. So you would have to find out that the citation exists, whether you searched it in another database or whether somebody handed you a reference or you found it in the bibliography. You would have to know that the article existed in such and such a volume, such and such an issue with such and such page numbers. You'd go to the library catalog where we do catalog the fact that we own the journal and what the date ranges are, the particular volumes from when to when. So you would have to then go into the catalog and check to see that we own that particular issue. But the actual citation that you're looking for, you would have to have gotten that information from somewhere else. Whereas in an online resource, typically these are commercial services that we subscribe to, and they will catalog at the article level of the journal or the paper level of the proceedings or the chapters in a compilation of essays. We might not have them, in full text, but you still find a reference to them, and you can check our catalog and see that we actually have the journal or the proceedings or the book. Okay, that's all I really want to say on that subject. On to full text searching. I want to throw in a quick disclaimer here. The next several slides are slides that I made up. I did not want the viewers to get stuck on any particular interface, but the example that I'm going to show you is a real life example from research that I was helping with a student carry out, and we used a particular database. But like I said, I wanted to abstract that. So the terms that we typed in, the results that we got, all of that is true. I just kind of made up the changed the interface to protect the innocent. Okay, this particular student was trying to. One of the things she needed to research for her dissertation was she wanted to know what the carrying capacity was of a vessel in relation to its length, and she literally typed in this term, and she got. You see the very first result. It's not exactly on target, but but at least it's maritime, right? But you look at the next three. You've got two from the medical field, and you've got one from the legal field, and we've got 2,753 results were found. Right now, we're looking at 25% of them being marginally relevant. That's going to be a long afternoon trying to figure out how to get those, just the right ones, going through all 2,700 plus to get a few relevant articles. So obviously, we need to do some things to narrow things down. But let's just take a look at why this, for instance, in the legal one, why did this come up? I mean, look at page 67, the word length is there. Several sentences later, the word carrying. 8 pages later, the word relation. Then you look on page 110, you see empty vessel there. That's not even being used in any kind of way that except a metaphor, and it's a reference in a footnote. But the reason this was retrieved, this particular very long article in the American Criminal Law Review, was that based on what this student had typed in, every word was in there. It just happened to appear all over the place. So this is obviously one of the things you got to worry about when you're doing full text searching. And you look in the one of the medical examples, the very same thing. You see the words in there, they're just in different pages. This thing just searched throughout the entire document. If you had an ebook of several hundred pages, you could pull up a lot of stuff that was just not relevant, but the words happened to be in there. So what we're going to talk about is ways to narrow things down and get it to a little more accurate. So the concept we use is limiting. One of the limiters we do is phrase searching, where we want to search for an exact phrase rather than just words appearing anywhere. And the Boolean and. Sometimes the Boolean not will help in limiting, but the Boolean and always helps in limiting because it's got to be this and that, and that's always going to limit the subset. So let's take a look here at our phrase searching. Databases will do things differently. I mean, you'll have to look in the advanced help of a database to find out if and how they do phrase searching and how they do Boolean searching. But in most databases that the library has, if you put words within quotes, the database will search it exactly as a string, so that the vessel length and carrying capacity, as you see in these examples, will have to be found exactly right next to each other, not just anywhere in the document. And of course, they have to be ANDed together. So we tried that, and it did narrow things down. But as you see, it narrowed it down considerably, way too much. And only the second one looks any bit relevant. So we're really doing poorly in terms of relevance and comprehensiveness. So now we're going to have to look at ways to expand our search. A couple of techniques for that: truncation and wildcards, and the Boolean or. So with truncation, in many databases, it's just an asterisk. But if it doesn't work that way, again, look at the database help, the help that's particular to that database or the advanced search, and you'll see how to do truncation. But in this case, it has a root or trunk, and then anything after that is just whatever it could be. So in this case, we get vessels plural, length, lengthens, lengthen, etc. Carriage, carries, you get the idea. Now, I did not have an example of a wildcard, but a wildcard, many databases is a question mark, but again, databases differ in the particular character they'll use for that. But if if a database does a wildcard, it's basically a substitution of one character. Sometimes some of them you can get really fancy and substitute several characters, but I'm just going to give this example. And you see here if we have different spellings for gray or gray, so this wildcard would cover it. In terms of or, that's very straightforward at vessel or hull, because we found out that hull length was something that was often used in the literature, and so we didn't want to miss out on the word hull and just limit it to vessel. So I'm going to throw another concept at you called proximity. This is pretty advanced. Sometimes instead of the word near, you'll see ADJ standing for adjacent. But what I'm doing here is saying that within 3 characters, the word vessel or the word hull have to appear within 3 characters of the word length. And notice that I put parentheses around vessel or hull. That's a concept called nesting, where you're trying to segment logically one concept within your larger search. So I'm using the Boolean or, and I'm nesting, and I'm doing this proximity search. How close the words are together, and this is going to get me vessel length or hull length or length of the vessel or length of the hull, right? So that's because I'm doing this adjacency or proximity search of as long as the word length appears within 3 words of the word vessel or hull. Another concept we realized in looking through the literature, and this happens as you do full text research, is you get used to the vernacular, to the terms, to the terminology of the particular discipline, and you'll see these phrases over and over again. One of the things we did not know going in was that there's a term used in the industry called length overall, or sometimes abbreviated as LOA. So we want to get that concept in too. So we or that, and in addition to the previous results, we're also going to get anything mentioning length overall or LOA. However, even though I think we've got a pretty comprehensive on one of our concepts, it's only one of the concepts. Remember that this is just vessel length. We have another part to our search, which is the carrying capacity. We also learned that the word tonnage is used for carrying capacity. So note that I've got what's called nested Boolean, and I've got basically a nest within a nest. So you look at that first example, vessel or hull, one concept within the concept of the whole line on the top, and then at the bottom again, I've got carrying capacity or tonnage as another concept. So that's basically going to be our search. We get 573 results. That's a little better to work through, and we're probably going to have a little more relevance. However, remember that there was a lot of stuff on medicine and legal and law, that sort of stuff that we don't want. So this, we just, in order not to get this, I suppose there's some article or book that could have relevance to both medicine and vessel length as we're trying to determine it. But we thought it was safer to just get that stuff out. So we're using not. Now, understand that not, sometimes it doesn't eliminate anything, because if the concepts or the terms are not in the literature, then you're not getting rid of anything. But if they are, then you are. So when it works, not is a limiter, and as you see, it cut the results in half. And overall, the student was pretty satisfied with this. And this is certainly, you can spend an hour or so going through and bookmarking the things that you want, and so this works. So use these techniques when you're doing full text searching, but you should also know that there are limits to what you can search with full text. A lot of times you will get you'll see that there's relevant documents that just don't seem to match your search terms at all. I give an example here. I've actually had this several times where a student has gone right up to a database and typed in the phrase marine pollution. And I know of articles which mention ocean pollution, pollution of the sea, oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, and even make reference to MARPOL, but never once used the phrase marine pollution. So as a result, that very relevant document is not going to be retrieved. You also have to keep in mind that sometimes a term that's employed by a user has one or more meaning. For instance, when you type in the word piracy, sometimes you're going to get acts of kidnapping and robbery, on the seas, which is certainly what we're looking for. But you're also going to get a lot of clutter about copyright, which copyrighted materials, which we don't want, right? So we have to be careful in our use of terms. So how do we get around that? Well, that's where metadata comes in. And as I mentioned earlier, metadata is data about the data. It's based on fields, discrete pieces of information with very controlled terms that are put in there. So when your search is just not going against the entire full text, it's going on these very specific fields. So an example would be you don't want anything about Martin Stopford. You want just what Martin Stopford wrote. So you would type his name in the author field. The same thing, you're not necessarily interested in something that took place in 2010. You're looking for something that was published in 2010 or since 2010. And so you would use the date field that's available in the metadata. One of the things about metadata is it often uses very formalized terminology. There's several thesauruses that the library world uses. One of the ones we use mainly is called the Library of Congress subject headings. And what a thesaurus does is when we apply these terms in our metadata, you only have one accepted term for a concept or a person or a place. So even though most of us in this sector would refer to seafarers, the Library of Congress would have a sea reference to merchant mariners. That would actually be the subject heading. Same thing, ports, you would use harbors. Arabian Gulf, you'd use Persian Gulf. And you just, will... like I say, if you were to type the subject of Persian Gulf, you might not find anything if you use the subject field, because the subject is officially known as Arabian Gulf. Now, a good search engine will see that and say, did you mean Arabian Gulf or something, and provide you that link. But just be aware of that there is that when you're talking about a subject, it's very controlled. The other part, in addition to one accepted term for a concept or a person or a place, is that there's only one concept per term. Now, what would I mean by that? Well, in the example of piracy, for instance, the subject heading in Library of Congress subject headings is for piracy is what we're looking for. But if you see piracy with a parentheses copyright, then it's the other form of piracy as a subject. You don't necessarily need to know all these. In fact, you won't know them. But where the end user, you, the researcher, can where these will come in handy for you is just do your topical searching, your full text searching. When you're going to find one or two things that are relevant, click those. Look at the detailed record, and you will see usually subject headings, and they will be hypertext links. If you click that subject heading link, then it should pull in all of the relevant documents, all the other records that have that same subject heading. So, I'm not expecting you to memorize these subject headings, but be aware that they are very formal terms, that only one use, only one accepted concept per term, and and every term has one accepted use. You should know also that these expansion and limiting techniques that we showed when searching full text, they also apply with metadata as well, and you can use them in a combination if you need to. The nice thing is that although I showed how we used to do it old school from the command line, and it was actually pretty quick, nowadays the databases are web interfaces, and typically you don't need to know that much about what's going on under the hood and the nesting and all that. You still want to know about phrase searching sometimes, how to do a phrase search and how to do truncation and wildcard if it opts for that. But a lot of that Boolean nesting, and it's all taken care of with a nice web interface. Okay, wrapping it up. We talked about known item versus topical searching. We talked about the limits of searching the metadata, particularly in the library catalog. We showed the various techniques for limiting and expanding your search, especially when you're doing full text. And we talked about subject headings, and controlled vocabulary, using controlled terms to get more exact in your searching. The As far as the text searching and the metadata searching, we have a handout that we present when we teach this class, but we also keep copies in the library, and it's just shortcuts to remembering these techniques. Of course, you can also visit our homepage. Well, that's all we're going to be covering in this session. We hope as we get better at making videos, we'll start producing a lot more of them. Appreciate that you've taken the time to view this, and stay tuned. We'll have